Welcome back to Beijing. China has the largest active military in the world and more naval ships than any other country. Despite the show of force, Beijing has not fought in a war in more than 4 decades, leaving its troops largely untested. Tonight we look at China's military buildup. China's military falls under control of the Chinese Communist Party rather than the state. The command structure includes not just military officers, but political leaders too. Have you seen a change from the time you served and now in the PLA?
Of course, tremendous changes, because I actually started my service in 1979. That is a time when China started opening up and reform. So I have seen all the changes.
Joe Bo is a retired senior colonel who served in the People's Liberation Army. He's now a senior fellow in the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University.
You can imagine what a kind of sea change it must be, right? At that time, China is definitely one of the most backward countries. And now China, probably in other people's eye, is a country standing more next to the United States.
China has put a lot of money and time into building up its military. Does China have military advantages over the U.S.?
I think the conflict in Iran was a real clear signal to the Chinese that they have a ways to go in developing their military forces. That said, they are engaged in a massive conventional and nuclear forces buildup.
The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimates Beijing launched 220 warships between 2000 and 2024, while the U.S. added 107 in the same time period. The U.S. and China are the 2 largest military powers. How does China view the U.S. militarily?
The goal is to become a world-class military by 2049. If you talk about, our capabilities around the globe, I think we are far behind the United States. But if you are talking about our military capabilities in the periphery, I think this is closing.
The number of Chinese naval ships now surpasses the number of U.S. vessels. The U.S. Navy is still ahead in total tonnage, and its ships are considered superior due to technology and operational experience. As China's built up its Navy, did that change the dynamic in the South China Sea?
Well, it certainly does. The South China Sea right now is a flashpoint at places like Scarborough Shoal, which is generally considered to be part of the Philippines. But also we have seen the Chinese go hard after the Japanese in the East China Sea. So they've got a numerical advantage there. They've got the bases in the Spratlys in the southern portion of the South China Sea. And that really means that in a fight, the Chinese have a built-in initial advantage.
China has also built its own islands in the disputed waters. Estimates show since 2013, China has added around 3,200 acres of new land, some of which are now equipped with military bases, fighter jets, and missile launchers.
Are you saying that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked?
Yes, we have a commitment to do that. That's the commitment we made. We're not encouraging their being independent. We're not. That's their decision.
But would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
Our policy has been strategic ambiguity. President Biden wasn't that ambiguous in some of those answers. One, do you think China is closer to doing that, to taking over Taiwan? And 2, what would our response be?
Well, I think you're right. We do have a responsibility to Taiwan. You've seen President Trump exercise, selling military weapons to Taiwan 3 times what had been previously done.
We support the Republic of China, a founding member, as the only rightful representative of China in that organization.
President Dwight D. Eisenhower is the only sitting commander-in-chief to ever visit Taiwan, and did so when the U.S. still supported the nationalist government on the island. Since then, top U.S. and Taiwanese officials have held few direct talks and have had even fewer face-to-face conversations while adhering to the One China policy.
My belief is that those citizens of Taiwan will still be secure.
When President Jimmy Carter formalized relations with the People's Republic of China, the policy put in place U.S. acknowledgement of the Chinese position that Taiwan was part of China. Washington would maintain unofficial relations with Taipei's government, but when it came to defending the island militarily, the policy was intentionally vague. A lot of the questions now center around Taiwan and what China may or may not do. As you look at this, U.S. policy has been strategic ambiguity. Is President Trump ambiguous, or do you think does he stand on Taiwan?
Well, he has not been clear about Taiwan, and that's in line with American foreign policy that goes back decades. The Chinese military is not in a position right now to go after Taiwan. This is a very good time for us to be clear what we will do to protect freedom and democracy in an important friend of the United States.
President Xi, though, may say, look what you did in Venezuela. Look what you're doing with a blockade in Iran. Why can't we do that around Taiwan? It's closer than those places are to you.
Let's just say the Chinese moved successfully against Taiwan. That assumes that China then stops there and that is the end of the play. If you've got the largest surface fleet in the world, and when I speak to Chinese interlocutors about, well, you'll then bring about a peace dividend, will you? And sort of retrench half of your navy because mission accomplished, they quietly smile. So the underpinning reason why I think it is in America's interests to hold a line in terms of Taiwan is you don't want to create, frankly, a strategic tipping point which causes China to believe it can move into the Central Pacific.
Do you think that's going to come up in this summit and be a dominant factor here?
Yeah, definitely it will come up. I really, really believe it is in America's own interest not to sell arms to Taiwan. Why? Because now China simply has more tools in the toolkits. Yeah, be it sanction or be it military exercises around islands, which, if this kind of arms sales continue, will definitely become more frequent, more sophisticated, which eventually would make the situation more tense.
Along with a focus in naval assets, President Xi has also boosted China's space program. Bill, you wrote about the Space Force and the report predicting a future conflict with China when it comes to space.
Yes, the Space Force is saying they looked out at 2040 and they saw what they said is low-level or gray zone warfare. That is really conflict below the level of actually firing lasers or missiles or that kind of thing. I think we're already kind of in that kind of a zone right now, except the U.S. side is rather refusing to recognize it.
Beijing is not part of the International Space Station program. The U.S. objected to China's inclusion over concerns its space program was too secretive and too closely tied to its military. But China could soon have the only permanent presence in space. The International Space Station is expected to deorbit in the next 5 years. If no replacement is ready, China's Tiangong space station will be the sole habitat in orbit. What are China's space ambitions?
Well, say in space, China is developing by leap and bounds, but we have been calling for no placement of weapons whatsoever in space.
Would China consider including other countries on its space station? The U.S. is going to deorbit its space station until another one gets up. Are there other countries that China is working with?
Well, China is certainly most open to this kind of idea. The question lies with the United States, because you have Wolf amendments, which would actually tie up your own hands. Because for your astronauts, say, to join a Chinese astronaut to work in Chinese space station, you have to, break your own taboos first.